Hey guys, what's going on? It's finally a nice day out, and I'm not copiously repotting seedlings and plants, so I want to finally film a video, and it's about something called the Nectar Flow. And it's basically just another reason we should all embrace native plants whenever we can. The Nectar Flow basically refers to the flow of resources with regards to pollen and nectar throughout the seasons, and how it can help bees and pollinators thrive. So without further ado, let me show you some things. So right here, it's kind of going out of bloom now, so the flowers are pretty ugly looking. Well, this is Indian plum, and it is one of the first flowers to bloom in the year. This is very significant because it's one of the first food sources available for bees coming out as early as February, sometimes even late January if temperatures are correct. And so all these plants we have in our environment naturally have been fine-tuned through evolution to come out at very specific times of the year, produce the nutrients needed and everything needed for the things that rely on it to survive. And it's just another reason to plant native plants. And by planting all these native plants, we're really giving our bees and butterflies everything they need to thrive and have resources throughout the entirety of the season when they're active. And we can't really replace these by non-native plants because a lot of times they don't have the correct nutrients, they aren't available at the right time of year, they don't produce fruit or seed that can be used by other things, they're not attracting caterpillars or insects that can be fed on by birds. But yeah, let's show you guys some more plants that are in bloom early spring and that are important to this whole flow of resources thing I'm talking about. This here is salmonberry, another one of the first shrubs and flowering plants to bloom in the year. And it's definitely one that's favored by bees as well as hummingbirds compared to a lot of the other options that are first available. But it's a beautiful plant, I really love it. Probably one of the second ones to open, and they bloom anywhere from like March till May, roughly. So you can see like from Indian plum blooms first, and then somewhere in that period where it's in bloom, this starts to bloom. And then from there, other things start to bloom, and then there's always something available. You know, and although this isn't a native tree, I believe this is just some random cherry tree. You know, flowering trees, specifically native flowering trees, are one of the best additions you can do in your yard or garden, especially maybe if you have a garden, but you don't want to maintain it or upkeep it or put in a lot of work. Like a single tree like this provides just a ridiculous amount of blooms and resources for that one period. And the trees are really essential to the nectar flow of resources. Having all that nectar and pollen available in one spot for the bees to gather is really important. So plant a crabapple tree. I'm trying to get everyone to plant crabapple trees. They're so beneficial for everything, and they're amazing. And unfortunately, a lot of what's left of, you know, quote unquote natural areas are like this, which obviously a lot of you guys aren't going to be able to tell, but this entire like trail and small area is like almost completely overwhelmed by invasive species and things that aren't actively contributing to our ecosystem or environment. A lot of stuff insects can't really feed on. And so when you have areas like this, they really can't function very well. It's like you have some of the native stuff, but there's almost like no ground cover or low growing plants that are native in this area. And as a result, that takes away a lot of the function this area could have, because you're going to have gaps where there aren't any resources available, or at the very least there's a lot less resources available than what is needed to really support the life that would be living in this area. And here is another awesome early bloomer, our Pacific bleeding hearts, Dicentra formosa, and probably one of the bigger favorites among gardeners and stuff like that. Very pretty, good for bumblebees and hummingbirds. It's actually also a host plant for the Clodius parnassian butterfly, which is a beautiful butterfly I've yet to see in real life. You know, it's like if you go out and look at these natural areas, there's quite a bit in bloom already. and they're beautiful. That's really the point I'm trying to hit home about. There's always something in bloom naturally that is supporting things and helping our ecosystem. And like I'm going to keep on saying, this is why we need to get on board with native plants. Even though they're not always as pretty or aesthetic, they're just so important and beneficial for our environment. If we really want to see gardens that are alive and thriving and not just sterile landscapes. And right down here we have these little whitey pink flowers. They're really cute. I have some in my garden. These are called candy flower, Siberian miner's lettuce. And they actually have a specialist bee pollinator called the mining lettuce mining bee. And so you can see even little flowers like this all have their evolutionary connections, and it's really important that they're there so the pollinator can also exist and we don't lose that crucial biodiversity. Now I'm going to try to be careful when I walk over here because we have some Pacific Trillium, which is a beautiful flower. What's really interesting about them is they actually don't make any nectar. They also turn like pink when they're basically done blooming. It's really cool. Yeah, they don't make any nectar. So that means anything visiting them is purely after the pollen they create, which would be bees and beetles generally. They also take several years to bloom, especially if you're growing them from seed. You're looking at a few years before you even see them bloom. They're very, they don't like disturbance, basically, like a lot of our plants here. But, you know, it's just another example. Like, these guys just create pollen. Other plants probably create more nectar. And, you know, when you have them all, you have that big picture of biodiversity where they all come together to really help the ecosystem thrive. So just in this area, we got some bleeding hearts. We got a trillium that's just finishing blooming. And we got these little guys, which is Hooker's Fairy Bell, which is just coming up. So some things are going out of bloom. Other things are just coming up and they'll be in bloom shortly. And the stuff that is in bloom and will still be in bloom for a little while. So there's always something, while certain resources are transitioning off and others are coming into season, you know, besides winter, of course. That's another reason why I wanted to talk about the Nectar Flow and just this little subject matter, because it really points out the importance of having these floral resources available, especially in early spring when a lot of these resources can be very scarce for bees. As you can see here, we have a large red elderberry tree. It's just starting to bloom. These big white blossoms are fragrant and they attract little bees and beetles. A lot of times these big white clusters of flowers are very attracted to beetles and things like that. You know, as you can see, a lot of the first flowers that bloom in the year are big shrubs, even trees. And that's because as soon as they get pollinated, they can go on to make berries or seeds that are then useful at other times of the year for other organisms and pollinators or whatever feeds on that seed or berry. You know, it's only like, it's not even May yet, it's the end of April, and the vine maples are starting to come out, and these are the little flowers they make, you know. A lot of people probably wouldn't even think about flowers when it comes to maple trees, but they do make flowers. Technically this is a shrub, but they're huge, so I think most people would call them trees. You know, it's barely, not even May yet, and there's already so many things in bloom. And you know, like here's some more salmonberry over here. It's one of the first flowers to bloom, as I said earlier, and it's also one of the first, it is the first shrub to make berries. So it's one of the first food sources for birds and bears, especially bears coming out of hibernation, looking for some fruit and some yummy stuff to eat. It's beautiful red clusters of flowers that hummingbirds love, and they actually co-evolved alongside hummingbirds, so that it's one of the first things in bloom when they migrate here. And a lot of bees and things like it too, as well as butterflies. So you can see why you really need to have kind of all the pieces in order to support everything, because not every flower supports every bee or hummingbird, etc. They'll support different things that they've evolved alongside with to really fill in all those gaps and pieces. Another thing we have a lot of here in BC is Himalayan blackberry, as you can see here. It's actually part of our invasive species list and is extremely detrimental to our environment here as it spreads and displaces a lot of the native vegetation that's feeding everything. And a lot of people would make the argument, well, it makes berries, it makes flowers, what's so bad about that? And it's because it hasn't evolved with our ecosystem and it provides those resources at the wrong time. So like compared to all the space this blackberry is taking over and taking up, this could be a mosaic of a lot of other species that are going to feed things at different times of the year where it's really needed. Especially by summer, there's a lot of resources available. So having something like this doesn't really help the entire cycle and the entire year of resources for everything that needs it. So I hope that makes sense. Just wanted to do one example of kind of the other side of things with something non-native and how that compares. Well, there's one more plant I want to show you guys, and it's up the steep ass trail, so hope you guys appreciate this as I climb this fucking hill. Okay, let's go. Okay, so I made it. You can't really tell from here, but it's a bit of a ways up. And we made it to Mahonia nervosa, which is short Oregon grape here. Only grows 2 or 3 feet tall, and you see you have these gorgeous yellow flowers, a lot of things like them. Bees, hummingbirds, butterflies. They make berries in the summer. Quite sour, actually. Guys really like this sort of video. I didn't script it or anything. Scripting stuff is really not my style, but I hope I was able to teach someone something out there and at least someone found this useful. So like, subscribe, comment down below if you like this kind of content. I'm going to be making more and more as time goes on. Spring is pretty busy for me, but especially towards summer, I anticipate I'll be making a lot more content and things like that. So let me know if you like this video unscripted. I'm probably going to do a lot more unscripted as well as scripted things here and there. But yeah, besides that, I think that's everything I wanted to show you today. Peace.